This guy right here is an absolute anime loser, but then it all changed when big brother Sasuke visited this bum and gave him the ability to freeze time with his Sharingan. And just like that, he became the #1 menace to anime society, since we all know boys will be boys. First off, he claps his bullies in front of everyone like no tomorrow since he's the alpha Chad now. Then he goes and steals their girls and all the popular ones to get revenge. But it doesn't stop there. He goes hunting like Ash Ketchum since he wants to catch them all after being rejected all his life. Anyways, let's just start from the beginning because he's about to do anything he literally wants. One morning, a boy named Zhuo Yang rushes to the bathroom mirror and simultaneously grips his left eye. However, he finds a mysterious red symbol has taken a hold of his eye. It's then revealed that he can see some kind of information atop his head, including his own name. But just like any normal person, he shrugs it off and continues to school like nothing ever happened, even if his eye begins to cosplay Sasuke. Nevertheless, at school, he reveals that he's just the average type of guy with such average looks, but with below average grades as he's going to cram school for retaking a failed exam that everyone seemingly passes. He's also not good at sports but loves to game a lot, so he can't defend himself when he gets thrown around. As such, he gets clapped as he got caught liking a popular girl. Regardless, while thinking back to what just happened, his eye begins to act up again and it begins to take over as he starts seeing information about everyone else. Ouyang then begins to think to himself that the reason this is all happening is because he was playing too much ranked Valorant, but the information is too clear and detailed to just be hallucinations. He also notices that he sees the correct names and ages, but is oblivious to the rest of the information seen, such as difficulty and interest. However, he realizes that the information about the girls are a little bit more detailed compared to the guys. Unluckily for him, he begins to notice that all interest of the girls are at exactly 0, so he begins to feel ashamed about himself because he believes he's that uninteresting. Eventually, he gets over himself and finds the popular girl, Kim Ran, surrounded by 2 popular guys asking her out. Meanwhile, his friend Park Ji-woon asks if he wants to go play Tekken afterwards, but he declines, saying he needs to go study. Suddenly, his special eye activates again, so he looks at Ran again and finally notices that her interest level is at level 1. Now in disbelief, he begins to stare and refuses to believe that the school's Queen Bee may actually have an interest in him. Unfortunately, she notices that he was staring at her. She then begins to call him out and asks why he's looking at people with such disgusting eyes, causing the entire class to bring their attention to the two. He proceeds to break down and continues by claiming that she was seeing things, so she comes closer and asks if he's saying that she was lying. Ran then screams that she caught him secretly looking at her entire suit of very nice armor, so she whips out her hand, causing his life to begin flashing before him, thinking that it's all over for him now. An eternity passes, so he looks up and notices Ran as if she was frozen in time. It's then revealed that the king's ability named Stopwatch has been activated, causing all time to stop for exactly 5 minutes. At the same time, a pop-up has appeared saying that a tutorial quest has started where he must make Ran shout really hard. If completed, the target's interest will increase by 20 and the target domination will also increase by 20 points. Now thoroughly confused, our boy has become a Chad and begins to awkwardly smile. Fast forward 5 minutes and Ran is found shaking on the ground. Meanwhile, everyone is shocked that somehow loser Ouyang has suddenly disappeared. Ran then instantly finds herself feeling really weird, as if something just happened in a flash. She continues to tremble and wonders why her body suddenly feels super weird. If you know what I mean, wink wink. Regardless, just like the Flash, we find Ouyang somehow back at home during all the commotion, where he murmurs to himself that everything could have totally got out of control. Regardless, we find out that during the entire 5 minutes that time is frozen, Homeboy actually took the opportunity to complete his quest and instantly warped home. Upon completion, his eye once again activates and notifications claiming that he has leveled up began popping up. With his newfound level, he gained a brand new skill called the Eye of Incubus. He then finds another notification that popped up telling him to check his status window. Fortunately for him, the game-like window appeared before him, showing all kinds of information about himself. However, he realizes that his stats are actually pretty bad, even though he has a cool nickname. Eventually, he finds another notification claiming that he has 2 incomplete quests. As such, his curiosity made him tap on the window, which opened up his incomplete quest list tab. There, he finds that one of his quests involves strength leveling, while the other is about conquering. Ouyang is then quick to complain about his strength training quest, but shrugs it off as he remembers that he just gained an incredible ability that can literally freeze time. As such, he begins to celebrate as he can now leave the life of being a loser and can become reborn as a true powerful man. He's then quickly interrupted by someone saying "excuse me" behind him, so he goes to investigate, only to find his red-head next-door neighbor. He's then shocked to find out that such a pretty girl lives next to him, almost just as shocked as me to find out that Ouyang lives by himself. Nevertheless, he asks her what brings her here, only for her to reply by asking him to keep it down as she's busy prepping for her exams. During their conversation, Ouyang realizes that he can now see detailed information about others, but is unable to do so as he does not have enough ME. He then sighs as he tries to begin figuring out what exactly that meant, forgetting that his neighbor is still in front of him. As he crutches his eye, he begins allocating stat points to ME, allowing him to successfully unlock the extra details of Park Nami. One of those extra details is the aforementioned measurements and marriage status, causing Ouyang to begin to scoff at the boyfriendless Nami for calling him out. He then proceeds to stop time by activating stopwatch level 2. At this very moment, he begins to grow a couple inches taller as he confirms that he has actually gained the ability to stop time. And well, the rest was history. As such, he calls out her name and proceeds to do the same thing he did to Ran. Unfortunately for him, things don't go according to plan as he gets zapped and punished for coming into contact with someone at interest level 0. Ouyang then falls to his knees while Nami tries to help him as she thinks he's fallen sick. Back at school the next day, Ouyang is busy thinking about his previous encounter, but gets rudely interrupted by no other than Ran herself. This time, she asks for Ouyang to come with her to the bathroom. There she asks about what truly happened on the previous day, only for Ouyang to act as if nothing ever happened. This causes Ran to scream, saying he did it, that it was him that made her undies disappear. But ever since he leveled up, Ouyang has become a different man and decides to turn it on her, saying that she's doing all of this just to attract him. Ouyang continues to push on, making Ran begin to visibly shake. However, she reminds him that they are still inside the girl's bathroom and starts to threaten him that she'll scream, only for Ouyang to rebuke her by saying, "Sure, if you can." Now attempting to call his bluff, Ran opens her mouth, but Ouyang is quick to activate his eye, allowing him to once again stop time. Moments later, Ran finds herself alone and unable to talk, as it's revealed that Ouyang can now turn on or turn off a target's mind. He then reappears and asks her if she was even slightly surprised. However, he rambles on by claiming that although her mind is awake, she can't even speak or move. He continues on by saying that she should have been nicer. Ultimately, he brings her closer and tells her that he's basically a demon king, just like the ones in games or anime. Nevertheless, what happens next is something I cannot show, so just use your imagination. Oh, and yeah, he basically begins controlling her and finds out what she really likes. You know, now after a couple minutes, a countdown began telling him that his ability is about to wear off in 10 seconds. Unfortunately, he was stuck in a compromised position, leading to him being unable to leave. With his ability now gone, he begins to think he's literally screwed. He then continues to panic as Ran begins to come alive. However, the turntables and Ran's interest level spikes to 40. Now thinking quickly on his feet, Ouyang begins to attempt scaring Ran and asks if she liked pineapple juice. With his remark, she quickly gets embarrassed, but he tells her that there's not a single reason to be embarrassed at all. He then mentions that with her drinking pineapple juice, they have formed a magical contract, proclaiming that his pineapple contains powerful magic and curses. Thus, the girl who drinks will become his. Ouyang then warns her that if she does not listen to him at all, she will quickly perish. And just like that, she actually believed everything, including how Santa is actually real. To his surprise, Ran begins to actually cry and she even begins to cling on to him. To defuse the situation, he explains that even though he's the great demon king, she's not actually instantly cursed. Instead, he mentions that for a human, she's actually his type. She's pretty and she's even fit, so she's the demon king's type. He then continues on and just warns her to just fully obey him and everything will be okay. Ouyang even mentions that if she does great, then she'll gain wealth, fame, and everything else that she can imagine. However, the bathroom door begins to open. So he takes her arm and the two end up stuck in a stall. Now taking the opportunity, he tells her it's some sussy time, so he asks her to show him some of her talent. As such, the two end up on a scenic bike ride inside the stalls, but it's hard to keep the electric motor quiet from the rest of the room. Unfortunately, they accidentally filled up the bike too much. The story continues with Ouyang hiding closely behind Ran, where the Demon King makes sure she has enough protein. Nevertheless, he levels up and becomes stronger while Ran's interest simultaneously reaches max level. Thus, Ouyang powers up with a new skill, faster than it was me, Dio, ever could. They then teleport back home where Ran heads into the shower. Inside, she begins to think and tell herself that loser Ouyang could never be that so-called Demon King, since there's no way that can exist, even though there's literally a guy that can stop time. She continues to complain, saying that this can't be happening to the most popular girl at school. As she rambles on with her disbelief, she reveals that she actually has started feeling something resembling of liking him. causing her to instantly shudder at her own thoughts. Suddenly, she collapses to the ground, utterly confused on what's happening. However, she finds herself jolted with power, now thinking that she's being punished by Ouyang himself. Meanwhile, our king is fully satisfied with today's events, so he continues on feverishly reminiscing about what happened. He even continues on shouting, exclaiming that he is now a true demon king. Unfortunately, a true problem literally arises, but Ouyang gets distracted trying to figure out how to allocate his remaining stat points. He's now leveled up twice since he redeemed his powers, with his strength, agility, stamina, and ME all increasing, yet he still has 6 remaining stat points. As such, he experiments by putting 2 points into strength, causing abs to begin popping up on his stomach. However, he now faces a new conundrum. Should he put all his points into strength to become Ultra Jack like Arnold? Or should he save some points for ME to better use his abilities? Nevertheless, a notification appears letting him know that Ran is thinking about him, but he didn't even sneeze. Another pop-up occurs alerting him if he wants to use the skill Soul Connecting, but just like any ranked Q pop-up, he instantly pressed yes. Instantly, a dark circle appeared beneath him, taking him straight to where Ran is. But this time, he's invisible just like my farts. With his newfound power, he begins to scan the room only to Ran right beside him, absolutely collapsed on the floor. He attempts to help her out, but she begins to think she's hearing things, not realizing that an invisible man is right beside her. Now thinking that she's about to be punished, she begins to apologize, but her plan backfires as Ouyang now knows she's been saying bad thing about him. As such, she pleads even more, but we have some turntables as he only asks if she's okay. She explains that she's just feeling really hot, but Ouyang knows what she truly meant. As such, she orders her to fix it herself before she can order some more pineapples. Somehow she learns French and says pardon, so Ouyang channels his inner motivator and says just do it. Eventually, she complies to his demands as she does not want to incur the wrath of the Demon King. Meanwhile, Ouyang continues to watch on. In the end, she learns French again, so he complies by helping her with the French language of love. While he cosplays a jackhammer, they get rudely interrupted by a ringtone, but they attempt to ignore it. Unfortunately, it rings again. This time he checks it out only to find out that a simp is trying to text her. Nevertheless, the next day arrives where Ouyang once again finds himself back at school. There he begins to really take in that he's gained some pretty unique powers, and his stats has begun to grow even more. As class starts, he finds the same classmates, but this time the same girls that had their interest at 0 began to slowly increase one by one. To his surprise, one even said good morning to him as she passed by, but he awkwardly replied back. Moments later, he overhears another girl talking about how he's finally starting to look cute. Within just 2 days, he went from a nobody, and now to someone that a girl actually wants to sit beside. In shock that someone really asked, the girl asks again due to his no response. He finally musters up the courage to say of course, but he's once again looking like his old self with no confidence. Lucky for him, the Fire Nation attacks, so his eye activates once again. This time he looks at Park Naeong and finds out that her interest level is at 8. But just like in every anime, meet a harem. Without hesitation, he activates his powers and proceeds to take a closer look at his Mutoi. He begins to look for pillows because he's a devious boy. However, he finds out that she's very pure. He continues to talk to himself while everyone is still frozen, but out of nowhere, he receives a penalty due to low interest. Lucky for him, he somewhat half expected this to happen since the tutorial is now over. Regardless, he begins to hope that a new domination quest would appear, but suffice to say, he gets disappointed. After time runs out, Naeong is instantly jolted awake. This time her twin towers is exactly not tilted. She then becomes uneasy as Ouyang intently looks at her, but with his crazy Riz level, he just says hi. Just like that, she begins swooning at our Ultra Chad. Soon after, her interest level jumps from 8 to 9 just by having him look at her. He then begins the long con in his head, since he still has Ran in his pockets. Speaking of Ran, nowadays she always looks like she wants pineapple juice, so Ouyang decides to try and make her jealous. Sure enough, it begins to work. However, a popular guy walks up to her, but she uncharacteristically ignores him as she's busy soothing in anger. She then stands up while still ignoring him, only to quickly kick the back of Naeong, and she proceeds to angrily tell her to quickly swap seats. She then repeats herself aloud to the astonishment of the popular gang, causing them to start thinking that Ran may actually like Ouyang. Hearing all of this, our simp overlord begins mauling, so he proceeds to threaten his friends. Now having enough of this, he starts heading towards the Demon King. Meanwhile, Ran finally gets to sit beside an unamused Ouyang, who proceeds to berate her for interrupting his search for his harem. She quickly feels bad, but he lightens up the mood by teasing her, saying she's jealous. He then reassures her that since she's his first, to not overly worry, allowing Ran to feel some sort of relief. He then follows with a question asking if she followed his command from the previous night, to which she confirms she did. Turns out you got to pick out what she wore, and let's just say she's missing some things. Nevertheless, Ouyang gets up and asks to go outside the room. However, he is blindsided by our simp, causing him to fall over. The simp then calls him a loser, but he actually activated his trump card. At the same time, Ran gets furious at the simp, while Ouyang is busy channeling his inner demons. He then takes the earthbender stance and begins to get up, and at this moment we knew the simp screwed up. Ouyang then begins to belittle the blonde boy, and within a flash his eye activates. He sees that Jungjun has a strength level of 7, so he provokes him by calling him a pure little boy. He then follows up with a seismic punch that sends Jungjun flying across the room. Now astonished with his own powers, he murmurs to himself that he's going to transform into Superman with just a few more strength levels. Regardless, like a true king, he tells Jungjun that the only reason he always seemed weak was because he wanted to toy with his prey even more. Meanwhile, Ran is busy feeling electrified, watching the once loser boy turn into the man he is now. Back in the action, Ouyang lets him live and beckons Jungjun to come with him outside. There we find Ran by his side while Jungjun is forced to look on. Unsure of what exactly is happening, he asks Ouyang why he had to bring Ran outside as well. He replies by saying that he just wanted Jungjun to see something interesting. As such, Ouyang brings her closer to him and proceeds to make Jungjun seethe in jealousy. Ran then begins following orders from Ouyang, sending Jungjun into a state of shock. Ouyang continues on with more commands, which Ran happily obliges to. Meanwhile, Jungjun looks like he really has to go to the bathroom to do a number 2 just because of what he is seeing. Eventually, things escalated so quick that I thought I was Jungjun watching Team Rocket fly off again. Anyways, bro ends up actually looking like someone from Teen Titans, so he called upon his Roblox powers and finally decided to risk it all. Unfortunately for him, instead of running into One Punch Man, Jungjun encountered the One Kick Man instead, and just like that, it was all over for him. Ouyang then continued by mocking him in Australian by saying "Oi," and that's when you know things got real. Soon enough, Ouyang activated his eye again and forced Jungjun to be unable to move. He then comboed his skill by forcing Jungjun to watch him and Ran together, and this is the part where we begin to remember that this is a cultural book. At this very moment, we entered a brand new genre to which requires the viewer's imagination. Now before you guys ask again, the show is called Stopwatch, but the first 3 letters can be found in the comments below. Anyways, I feel bad for the guy, so we will skip the part where Ouyang cosplays a jackhammer. Nevertheless, it's revealed that Jungjun actually never had a chance beforehand, and upon hearing this, Jungjun's soul was crushed even more. Eventually, we get to our thumbnail, leading to Jungjun to finally cry. Meanwhile, Ran gets tossed to the ground like a ragdoll, while Jungjun looks like all hope has been sucked out. Suddenly, a notification appeared claiming that Ouyang has committed an evil deed, thus he gained even more bonus stats. Energy then started to flow in him as his charm and MP began to increase as well. Fast forward to the next day where we find Ouyang with Ran at school. With what transpired the day before, Ouyang's status within the school has skyrocketed after destroying the most popular guy in school. Girls even became more interested in him, while the boys got more jealous that a loser has been stealing all the spotlight. He even gained a brand new skill called Dignity, which forces overwhelming pressure on those lower than him. Now the guys who used to make fun of him cannot even literally look at him anymore. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Jungjun is nowhere to be found. However, he finds Naeong instead and notices that something is up and we don't mean him. With his presence alone, Naeong begins to quake as if Justin Bieber is around, so Ouyang decides to go up to her. Of course, it's a given that Ran has activated her jealous mode as she quickly realizes that the Demon King has eyes for another. Upon sitting down beside Naeong, she begins to stammer, so he activates his eye to see her interest level boom to 31. While the difficulty level dropped to F, he's instantly shocked to see such a high number, so he begins to plan his way of conquest. Thus, they begin talking about what happened the day before. However, his wishes come true as a domination quest began to appear. He then continued on by keeping his cool, but he accidentally messes up by saying her name, even though she never introduced herself. He saves himself by claiming that he was interested in her, which is why she knew her name. Meanwhile, Ran starts to visibly look not amused. After school, he invites Naeong over to his house, whilst quite amused with himself as he didn't need to use his powers yet. Upon arriving at their destination, he takes her hand and brings her inside like a true gentleman. He then quickly takes a shower, only to find Naeong nervously sitting on his bed. He then mentions that she's the first girl to ever visit his house, and with enough chit-chat, he went in like a cobra. Without the need to use his powers, he once again transforms into a jackhammer, and the rest was history. The story then continues with Ouyang explaining to Naeong that he isn't dating Ran. As such, everything's all fine and dandy, But Ouyang activates his powers to find out that Nayeon has a tendency to be attracted to strong males, like Harambe. He then uses this to his advantage as he watched her interest level fill up as fast as a fever. And just like in any game, he attempted everything to fill up the bar, allowing him to successfully complete his domination quest. Within seconds of the quest completion, Ouyang begins to gain even more power as his stats begin to increase. He then smirks and thinks to himself that it was way too easy, so he continues on and asks if she wants a banana since she's lacking some potassium. She then salivates at the thought of a banana, but he's just like nah and says he has to run out to go to the grocery, causing Nayeon to speak French in frustration. As such, Ouyang's face goes deadpan since he forgot to bring his phone with Duolingo to translate, but lucky for him, Nayeon is ready to teach him the love language. Nevertheless, they continue on with the impromptu lesson, but they get too excited, so the entire neighborhood ends up hearing them. Eventually, he's had enough with the lesson, so he activates his eye again to fully download Nayeon's deepest secrets into his membrane. Afterwards, he continues on by taking off her glasses so she doesn't get a headache. Suddenly, he transforms into a jackhammer to gain a brand new skill that overwhelms a target's brain after every hit. He accidentally uses it on Nayeon, so she begins to go wild, but he just goes along with it. With his newfound skill causing an increase in loudness, his red-head neighbor begins to get angry. Eventually, Nami slams her desk and gets ready to confront our demon king. She then heads out with fists in hand, unaware that Ouyang is currently extremely focused on bettering his craft. Meanwhile, Ouyang finishes his brain link with Nayeon, who seemingly is in utter bliss of his newfound skill. His skill is so overpowered that Nayeon begins to feel super free, just like I do when I reach the toilet. Anyways, Ouyang seals the deal by giving his phone to Nayeon so she could put in her number, which she easily obeys, so she finally has become part of the harem. Now inducted, he lets Nayeon even call him her boyfriend. They are then interrupted by some noise outside the door. Ouyang then goes to investigate as his curiosity gets the better of him, only for him to find Naomi, who passive-aggressively reminds him that she's his neighbor. However, she gets a bit shocked to see that Ouyang has built some mass, so she ends up stammering a bit as she gets flustered at the sight of the future god. She then also begins to shake, totally confused as to what's happening to her, causing Ouyang to ask if she's alright. Her body begins to move as if she has no control, only for Nami to keep thinking that there's no way Ouyang has become ripped like my pants. She then realizes that maybe the weakling Ouyang has been her type all along. With her acting super weird, Ouyang summons his eye and begins taking a closer look. This time it's revealed that Nami's interest has gone from an abysmal 0 to 11, just within one day. Thus, she takes the ripe opportunity and chats her up. However, she begins attempting to shyly bring up the earlier loud noises, only to find herself unable to fully express herself in front of the top gate. Suddenly, Nayeon Ferrari peeks the corner, sending Nami into a state of shock. Now stun-locked, all Nami could hear is Nayeon calling her sister. With the turntables, a brand new domination quest has been created, as apparently, the target now feels hostile rather than docile. In just mere seconds, Nami leaves one piece to reveal she's actually from planet Namek. Regardless, she fiercely utters the words, "Can we talk for a moment?" Fast forward to your typical coffee shop where we find Ouyang awestruck at the fact that his neighbor was actually Nayeon's sister. A flashback then occurs showcasing Nami screaming at Nayeon to head back home. She then demanded Ouyang to follow her, where we now find Ouyang stuck with the fierce redhead Nami. Although she's upset with him, a domination quest appeared, telling Ouyang to make sure he wins over Nami before the allotted time runs out. If he's able to complete the quest within 1 week, he gains an insane bonus 3 levels and an increase of 10 bonus charm stats. With the crazy reward, he begins to plan his way of conquest as Nami was his type anyways. As he daydreams, he gets brought back to life as Nami shouts right at him. However, another notification appeared claiming that failure to complete the quest will make him lose his abilities. Within just 2 seconds, Ouyang became a dang. From dreaming to instantly on edge, and not that type of edge. Regardless, some more helpful game tips popped up, letting him know that as long as Nami is hostile, she will not be gaining any interest levels, causing Ouyang to start being a little scared. As Nami continued on berating him, all Ouyang could think about is how he can punish Nami so he can finally get the quest over with. As such, he proceeded to nervously drink until he was able to finally focus. Unfortunately, the first thing he heard is Nami telling him to never meet Nayeon ever again. This caused him to utter the French words that everyone seemingly always says, so he asks why he has to do it. With his dumbfounded response, Nami is left speechless and not in a good way. Regardless, she slams the table and explains that Nayeon needs to study instead of getting distracted, which is why she's in a repeat school. She then gets so mad that she inadvertently helped Ouyang out as she's publicly feeling humiliated. She even continued on as if she's a Karen. attracting all attention from nearby patrons, causing herself to feel even more humiliated as more eyes began to drift towards them. Without even lifting a single finger, Nami's humiliation level has already went up to 8. After her tirade, she begins to excuse herself and heads out the door. However, she gets stopped on her tracks as Oh-young finally speaks up. He decides that his move to make her more angry by telling her that there's no way he would leave Naeun alone. As such, Nami turns angrily towards him, only for Oh-young to begin finger-wagging with utmost sass. He then starts off by saying that he's not even dating Naeun, causing Nami to be confused as she says that she heard them in his room. Now feeling embarrassed, Oh-young gets up and activates his powers to take advantage of the opportunity before him. This time, he has exactly 10 minutes to complete his plan, so he starts off by explaining to a frozen Nami that even though the duo has combined as one, it doesn't mean they are dating. Surprisingly, Nami mumbles some words back, although she can't fully move, which shocks Naeun. A pop-up then appeared claiming that Nami is partially resisting his ability, as she's busy telling him off. Nevertheless, she realizes that she can't move at all. So Oh-young leans closer only to ask her how she wants him to reward everything. He then insulted her over and over, but he was actually spitting facts. As he doesn't want the room to get too hot, he helps her out. Nami is then stricken to see what's happening, but all Oh-young does is mention that she's his type. He then goes Demon Lord style and says if she doesn't want him seeing Naeun, then he'll start by seeing her instead. He then proceeded her first ever annual inspection, but she begins to retaliate as she's actually strong enough to weaken his ability. She asks if he's gone crazy, but all Oh-young does is act innocent. Regardless, she begins to warn him that she's going to be a lawyer, and when she's done with him, he better not ever drop the soap. Unfortunately for her, Oh-young tells her to look around, explaining that everything is frozen and no one will ever know what's happening. Not even advanced cameras can detect his true powers. Nevertheless, we begin to time skip as he slips into his jackhammer costume. For those brave enough, this is chapter 14, page 69. Sorry, editor. Anyways, pineapple juice was very present during this time, but as time ran out, he was able to complete his quest and was rewarded with slight stat increases. Thus, the main character begins to become even stronger. Upon the arrival of the next day, it's occurred to me that Oh-young has become a mushroom, as he calls himself a fun guy. It's then revealed that his stats have drastically increased within just 3 days. If Oh-young was in Blox Fruits, he'd be on the verge of becoming mythical already. With his strength level just above 10, he begins to pack even more muscle. Now, while he was trolling before, he begins to think that he might actually get powerful enough to be an actual demon king. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted as he hears footsteps outside stemming from some sandals, which he quickly connects the dots as this has to be Nami. He's correct as he hears his fierce neighbor slam her door super hard. Thus, he thinks to himself that she must be angry, since it's not like someone froze time earlier and used it against her. Luckily for us guys, something bad finally happened to Oh-young since he runs out of money. He begins to cry as he doesn't even have enough to buy ramen, so he murmurs to himself that he's broke as hell even though he has crazy superpowers. So instead of freezing time to use his powers for good, he thinks to call up Ran to bring him food. However, he decides not to as it would ruin his pride. But Bro suddenly remembered he can stop time, so he hurries on to the nearest convenience store. Upon arriving, he hesitates as he thinks stealing is evil, but somehow everything else he's done is apparently not evil. Nevertheless, he decides to activate his powers and enters the store with only 5 minutes to complete his objective. Inside, he grabs some ramen, but he accidentally stumbles upon someone frozen who turns out to be a part-time worker stocking up the drinks aisle, causing Oh-young to get distracted. Without thinking, he attempts contact but instantly gets repelled as he forgot to look at her interest level. Apparently, she's also a K-pop idol trainee, so while we talk about K-pop, anyone like New Jeans? The story continues with Oh-young being repelled by his own powers, so he reluctantly leaves the store and remembers what a wise man once said, as long as there's a hole, then he still has his goal, like in any cultured anime. Nonetheless, he looks and realizes that he only has 30 seconds to get out before time begins to unfreeze once again. Eventually, his ability ends, but fortunately for him, he makes it out in the nick of time. He then tells himself that if he was never distracted by the frozen idol, then he could have at least got some Kit Kat ice creams for dessert. Regardless, a notification appeared claiming that Oh-young has committed a wicked deed, but instead of being punished, he was once again rewarded with a huge amount of experience points, while also gaining an upgrade to his main power. This dumbfounded him as his hero, Dio, underwent the time chamber to only freeze time for a few seconds, yet in a few days he can already stop time for more than 10 minutes. Furthermore, he's now also able to choose who gets frozen, rather than everyone be frozen at the same time. As such, he mumbles to himself that it actually seems like him becoming a demon king is about to be reality. Later, Oh-young receives 2 simultaneous alerts, alerting him that both Ran and Naeum are busy thinking about him, so he gets some temporary relief as his lower self has become rock hard like my poops due to his earlier encounter with the K-pop idol. However, he's now in a sticky situation as he can only choose one, so with some turntables, he refuses both choices and proceeds to tell himself that he doesn't need any of them. However, a second passes, so he quickly picks up his phone and dials up Naeum because he apparently needs some post-banana sage-like clarity. On the phone, he orders her to hastily meet up at his house, claiming that it's master's orders. Upon arriving, we find Ouyang eating a sandwich, while someone else is busy devouring his Malone ice cream. At the same time, we find Ran literally running up some stairs where she suddenly opens up the door to Ouyang's apartment. She happily enters and asks what Ouyang needed, only for her to see a scene that our editor always has to edit out. Of course, Ran gets shocked, but with Naeum caught in the act, she could not really reply as she would choke. Thus, an enraged Ran begins to utter the words, "What are you doing, stepmaster? I mean Naeum." With no response directed back, Ran loses her eyes and nose in utter anger, so she puts on her boxing gloves, as if she's about to fight guts. She proceeds to menacingly kick over Naeum and shouts at her, asking if she's gone absolutely off the rails. Meanwhile, Ouyang attempts to cool down the already hot-tempered Ran, but she makes the devastating mistake of telling her demon king to be quiet. In response, Ouyang nervously says to listen to him since he's the master. But just like in any romance movie, Ran claims that the woman needs to fight for the man if someone else is trying to steal him. Ran then continues to scream at Naeum, but eventually enough is enough and Ouyang finally speaks up. He mentions to Ran that she's starting to become arrogant, causing her to snap back to her senses. Ouyang then continued to mention that she's late, so he asks what's the reason for her to be talking so much. Thus, Ran begins to apologize, claiming that she was only late since she wanted to look nice for him. However, he brings her closer to him and says that isn't an excuse. He continues on with so much riz in hand and tells her that her efforts are futile since she won't be needing makeup or clothes. As such, he orders her to be like how I like my pizza, with nothing on it except pineapples. With Naeum right beside her, she questions him and asks if he actually wanted her to do it right now, causing Ouyang to become slightly annoyed, so she proceeds to go on with the order. Now not completely satisfied, Ouyang also asks her to do some squats, since he wanted to admire the rear guard. Eventually, she completes numerous squats, so Ouyang brings her over and takes her hand. He brings her over to his lap, and the rest was water under the bridge. Afterwards, Ran leaves a remark of how Ouyang is so mean, but he actually acknowledges it and reminds her that was just for punishment for earlier. Nevertheless, he ends up introducing the girls to each other and continued by telling Ran that from now on, to not ever fight each other again. Regardless, Ran quickly agrees to not fight Naeum again, but Ouyang visibly catches her still jealous at the fact that Naeum has been banana eating, so he reassures her and tells her to stop worrying since she's his beloved first. In the end, he asks Ran for a favor, which she quickly agrees to. However, it turns out that he wanted her to teach Naeum some very specialized skills. He explains that since she's had a lot of experience with different bikes before, then she's a prime candidate to teach a noob like Naeum. Unfortunately for him, Ran instantly gets furious and retaliates like the Flash with a quick hit. Totally confused, he asks why she would hit him, only for her to claim that he deserved it for saying it that way. Anyways, she asks what he wants her to teach Naeum, so the duo ends up completing a full-on course on how exactly French became a love language. Throughout the entire ordeal, we always have Naeum begin speaking basic French, always needing the help of the experienced Ran. Nevertheless, our editor has to endure sitting in the dark by himself during these two very troubling chapters, so please comment part 5 down below if you want more. Back in the action, a hidden quest appeared telling Ouyang to see if he could make both girls happy at the same time. If he succeeds, we know he's probably going to reach a power level of over 9,000 as he gets ready to best his worthy rival, Ash Ketchum. With the quest on hand, he hurries to completion as Naeum simultaneously reached the finish line with a single burst, allowing for Ouyang's completion of the quest. 2 notifications then appeared, rewarding with a new skill called Girls Link, coupled with more bonus stat points and more MP. Like a gacha game, another pop-up was hidden behind the others, letting him know that his incubus has become stronger, allowing for a subset passive named Weakness to be activated. As he collected his new powers, his soul accidentally gets taken over by Santa just for a few seconds. Afterwards, he gets close to Naeum's ear and whispers a thank you to her as he continues to cosplay a jackhammer. Suddenly, in the middle of cosplay, his new subset passive activated, causing him to start seeing light at specific points of the body. It turns out to be a weak point skill that leads to ultimate destruction, so our boy goes demon mode. With such overpowered skills, he mumbles to himself that this is basically cheating. Regardless, he decides to activate Girls Link as well, allowing him to share whatever Naeum is feeling to someone else that has an interest level of over 20, It's then revealed that he can link Nayeon with only two available people so far, Kim Ran or Park Nami. Luckily for Nami, Ouyang hasn't yet gone fully rogue as he decides to link it with Ran. It's then revealed that the skill actually works perfectly, so unfortunately, we have to skip an entire chapter of culture. Long story short, the girls basically end up feeling what it's like to win your first ever Fortnite match. Meanwhile, for the first time, Nami is in her room math studying as she's busy getting mad at Ouyang. She begins to conjure up theories if he can actually control time. She also thinks about whether or not she should report him to Riot, but she knows that everyone will think she's crazy. Now remember how Ouyang didn't link Nami with his sister. Well, the dang Demon King ended up doing it. The next day then happened upon them, where Nami ends up being jolted awake, so she begins to think that everything that has happened was actually all just a dream. It's also revealed that with Girls Link, she's having a very hard problem moving around due to succumbing to the powers of Ouyang. She then realizes that it's already past noon, so she begins to freak out as she hasn't been able to study at all. Thus, she mentions to herself that she's screwed. Suddenly, her door begins to slowly open, which begins to scare her, almost as much as I get scared when I play Roblox doors. Instead of being smart and preparing for defense, all Nami does is ask, "Who's there?" Luckily for Nami, all she hears is her sister calling her. Now finally relieved of the perceived threat, she begins to head towards the door to see Nayeon. However, upon closer inspection, she finds her worst dreams have come alive. She then begins feeling humiliated at the sight of Ouyang, only for him to chat up and ask if he can come in for a bit, causing Nami to begin hysterically shouting at Ouyang to get out ASAP or else she'll report him for forceful entry. Nayeon then intervenes asking her to stop, but Nami begins calling her using her full name, so we know things are about to get heated. She then proceeded to hurl insults at Ouyang, but all Nayeon could do is flash a creepy smile coupled with the words claiming that Ouyang is her master. Now in utter disbelief, Nami asks her what the heck is happening, only for Nayeon to explain that she's here to introduce her master to her own sister. She continues by saying that it's okay, and she'll understand once she plays with them. Now this is the exact moment where we should begin hearing shouts of "Roll Tide baby." The story continues with Nami's worst nightmare continuing to unravel before her as Nayeon begins to explain to her own sister that she deeply believes and knows for sure that she'll love what's about to happen, causing Nami to fully believe that there is no saving her own blood now as she's gone off the rails into the deep end. Meanwhile, future Demon King Ouyang applauds Nayeon and compliments her for saying it all so well. Regardless, Ouyang activates his eyes as he mentions that they both came here to play, where play doesn't mean playing Warzone. Thus, Nami begins to feel shivers all the way down her spine, as if she's in a horror movie. However, she's able to snap out of her flight response and begins to threaten Ouyang to not get any closer, as she'll turn on her serious mode, causing Ouyang to tell her to relax. But, just like in every anime with plot twists, he begins to take a hold of Nayeon instead. It's then revealed that they weren't here to go after her, but to show off their brand new relationship in sussy style. The show then goes on as Ouyang commands Nayeon to start cosplaying a beach girl, but to continue even further than that. Of course, without even the slightest of hesitations, Nayeon is quick to agree to his demands, even with Nami right beside her, stuck, unable to move like my stains on the toilet after some Taco Bell. Nonetheless, Ouyang is super pleased with the crazy display from Nayeon, as her profound obedience left him quite speechless. As such, he beckons Nayeon closer to him, where the two continue to be like two crazy peas inside one pod. Unfortunately for Nami, she begins to slowly quake at the sight before her, unable to do much other than shout at Ouyang to stop. Her shouting means nothing to the two, as Ouyang is able to fully captivate and entrance Nayeon with his demon-like powers. In fact, Nayeon begins to even look more happier than earlier, as things begin to go from 0 to 69. Now fully stunned and frozen in disbelief, Nami is unable to continue on talking. Now allowing Ouyang to seize the opportunity, he cold-heartedly amps up the show as he places the blame on Nami for how Nayeon has started to act. Suddenly, Nayeon speaks up by theoretically asking if Nami is to join the Sussy gang. Would that mean she's higher ranked than her? Ouyang responds by saying of course she would, as Nami would be number 3, while she would be number 2 on the hierarchy. With her question answered, she begins her climb to the very top of Mount Everest to reach the apex. Meanwhile, Ouyang begins to tease Nami by asking if she enjoyed herself yesterday, allowing Nami to start fully realizing that it was his doing the other day. Regardless, if you forgot how cultured this piece of art was, well, Ouyang's always ready to remind us by activating his link powers. Within seconds, Nami is struck like a sinking ship, but it's due to water leaking like it burst. However, Ouyang doesn't stop there, as he decides to finish the last blow to the sinking ship, as he decides to finally transform into an iceberg. Just like in Titanic, it was over before it even began. Anyways, long story short, they used her own bed and decided to desecrate her studying area in more ways than one. Also, Nayeon goes crazy and heads over to the state of Alabama, where it gets revealed that Nayeon actually had an inferiority complex the entire time. Thus, Nami got the literal short end of the stick as she got destroyed, with no one even near her. Eventually, Protein Man came around ready with his buckets of milk, as he was able to efficiently use his weak point skill to full effect. In the end, Ouyang was able to finally complete a hidden quest, rewarding with him 5 extra random bonus stats, and his target fully dominated. He also gained a level up due to the events that transpired, leading to another increase in jump of his charm skill by 10, and a brand new skill that must remain a mystery to the audience. The next morning, we find Ouyang waking up claiming that he slept super well after draining his glasses of milk. However, he reveals to us that him gaining strength levels still meant that he still has to go do leg day. But we know this boy ain't man enough to join the leg day gang. Nonetheless, he receives a notification congratulating him for finally surpassing the milestone that is level 10. Another notification then appeared, claiming that his title will now change as a reward. Now confused to what the system notifications really meant, he decides to check his detailed information page, only to realize that his current title still looks exactly the same. Still puzzled, he decides to move on and begins to focus on the fact that he's already level 11. As such, he decides to allocate some leftover bonus ability points to strength to reach level 20, just so he could alleviate his chicken legs. However, upon doing so, another notification appeared alerting him that he has now gained superhuman strength and telekinesis for hitting level 20. Now infused with more power, Ouyang helps me get confused as to how he got telekinesis from strength levels instead of ME. Nevertheless, he begins to show off his improved cows and quads, so he decides to test out his new powers. As such, he stands up only to hear a loud crunch underneath him, louder than when I eat Doritos. Anyways, he looks down and realizes that he accidentally crushed the floor with his newfound strength, so a pop-up appears alerting him that he has activated one of his skills. Then, without doing much more, the system begins to reveal to him that all his physical stats are now beyond the limits of a human, as they have all surpassed level 10. This was not good news for Ouyang, however, as he began to overly worry as him just standing up destroyed the floor, knowing he has to fix the floor before the landlord notices. Suddenly, another annoying pop-up occurred, claiming that Ouyang will currently not be able to control his strength until his stats begin to fit his normal daily life. Ouyang then begins to mumble to himself that he has now lived his dream of being that powerful guy in manga he reads. However, it's the special type that others have to watch on YouTube, so their family doesn't notice anything weird with their search history. Nevertheless, he gains another new skill, Devil Effect, while also finally achieving the unique title of being the official heir. But with such a devious name of a skill, he decides to read the description just in case. Upon reading the description, Ouyang figures out that the skill will just make him cool and add bravery. Thus, he quickly decides to try it out, so he carefully heads to the nearby mirror without breaking the floor and proceeds to activate the skill while directly looking at his mirror image. Suddenly, his hair goes pink, while a mysterious and colorful aura began to be emitted around him. Now super excited about his new look, he eagerly wants to show off his new self. Even his hair attempted to cosplay Goku, so he began thinking about who exactly to show off to. However, he deactivates this skill as he thought to himself that the girls always think he's already cool anyways due to him being a Riz master. Regardless, a sudden blood surge to the lower parts of his body led to a new problem which he now must quickly solve. As such, Ouyang hurried out his room as he attempts to assemble a quick fix to his current problem. So he arrives at the doorstep and begins to quickly smash on the door as if he has to really go to the bathroom. However, Nemi opened the door only to begin shouting at Ouyang again, asking him to go away or she'll report him. With such a hostile response, he begins to get confused as he thought he fully completed the quest, so he double-checks his domination record only to see that Nami is actually fully dominated. Thus, he begins to smash on the door again, threatening to break it down if she doesn't open it. Luckily, his threat works as he's greeted by Nami asking why he's here so early in the morning. Ouyang then directly responds by saying he's here to fuse their pods together in a romantic way, causing Nami to again begin responding in a less than appealing way. Now confused again to why Nami isn't cooperating like the other girls, he activates his eye where it's revealed that her interest level is too low due to being previously enemies, so her difficulty level has risen. Nevertheless, he begins to scratch the back of his head to find a proper solution, so the only thing he could think of is to activate his new ability. As he again begins to transform into a Goku Wane, Nami begins to get scared at the sight of an otherworldly. Afterwards, he relentlessly attempts to command her to crawl to him, but surprisingly, it actually begins to work. Just like that, Ouyang teaches us to cosplay Goku and the girl or guy of your dreams will be yours. In the end, she goes and grabs his melon ice cream. Soon after, he activates his telekinesis using his eye and shouts Leviosa. It then actually works as she swiftly lifted into the air while her clothes apparently using some kind of invisibility potion. Afterwards, our Demon King once again transformed into a jackhammer, but this time was unique, as they were suspended in the air for a couple seconds. Eventually, Nami was left in utter bliss on the bed. However, Ouyang hasn't fully completed his show yet, as he tells her that we still have the finish left to go. After completion, he proceeds to tell her to always open the door when he knocks, which she agrees to. Shortly after, he asks her if she has any cash, so Nami gets startled with the topic changing straight to money. Ouyang explains that he's now hungry, so he asks her if she can bring him to go out to eat. Lucky for him, Nami is a sugar mommy, so he just leaves her apartment without even bringing her along with him. As such, her soul begins to cry as she also wanted some Korean fried chicken. Fast forward to a nearby coffee shop where we find Ouyang celebrating with glee due to him finally having some money. During his shopping spree, he stops by the grocery store that had the part-time K-pop trainee. As such, he quickly opened the door, thinking to himself it is finally time to raise her interest. Unfortunately for him, he gets welcomed by someone that looks like he sings Gangnam Style as his part-time job. Without the K-pop trainee inside, he decides to just leave and act like nothing ever happened. Ouyang is then furious at himself as it's revealed that the guy was actually so good at selling things that Ouyang actually ended up buying stuff. Now thoroughly disappointed, his Mount Everest became Mount Gone, so he begins to get distracted as he heads home. While distracted, major disaster strikes as he accidentally bumped into someone else who happens to look like someone that could easily crush him. As such, he attempts to begin apologizing, but then he remembered that he had some special powers up his sleeves. But before he even activated them, the macho guy surprisingly apologized for running into him. It then turns out that his dignity skill activated, so Ouyang was unable to try any of his newer skills. Nevertheless, disappointed once again, he turns off dignity and begins heading back home. However, while passing by some nearby alleys, his attention gets brought onto one alley making a lot of commotion. Upon investigating more, he finds a boy bowing down before some people, where it's revealed that the boy has been apologizing and is covered in tears. Unfortunately, the boy continued to be bullied, as it turns out to be a shakedown. As such, Ouyang decides to go rescue him, as this reminded him of his old self before his Demon King powers. Upon arriving, he gets greeted by two girl accomplices who begin to mock him, while another guy told him to get lost. Anyways, he started blasting with some blistering and powerful punches. Ouyang started blasting with such tremendous power that he actually sent one of the henchmen flying straight into a wall. With his power on display, one of the nearby girls began to think twice about her involvement with the boy. Nonetheless, still outnumbered but not outmatched, Ouyang continues forward as he readies his fists, while busy asking the rest if they aren't scared that he just sent one guy flying like Team Rocket. Meanwhile, the head honcho finally switches his attention to the powered Ouyang, rather than the bully boy, only to ask him, who the heck is he? As such, Ouyang transforms his face into Rock Lee and replies by claiming that they are currently messing with his little brother. Within just mere moments, the bully's face swaps to the face I make when I forget that there's an exam today. At this moment, he knew that there is no turning back, no matter what he regretted from his actions minutes before. Thus, Ouyang removes his facepalm reaction by replacing it with his big, thick hands, as he forces him straight down into the ground like quicksand. It's then revealed with his eye that this wannabe tough guy is named Go Hyukchin, and is only level 4 with pathetic stats. However, upon closer inspection, it's revealed that this high school student already popped a cherry, causing Ouyang to be slightly irritated, as he himself did not pop a cherry until way after high school. Regardless, Ouyang insults him right before he down smashes him straight into the ground, face first. But of course, with such a deadly down smash, the guy isn't even unconscious, so Ouyang demands him to get up, unless he doesn't value life. As Hyukchin starts apologizing before him, Ouyang turns around to the rest of the guys and tells them to get lost, while also sternly warning them that if they continue to mess with his so-called brother again, then they'll be at the mercy of the great Demon King. Unfortunately, Ouyang's words just go straight from one ear to the other, as the boys are in immense shock from what they just witnessed. As such, Ouyang gets up, ready to destroy the rest, as they won't move or say anything. Fortunately for the group of boys, one of them regains their face, but he only could mutter up the words, "It wasn't us." With such a response, Ouyang's eyebrows continued to grow through his hair, so before he could beat them up, the boys made a run for it. Suddenly, Ouyang is alerted to a phone with max volume on as it started to record, only to be revealed that one of the previous girls began to threaten Ouyang, claiming that he's being recorded for fighting them. She then continues on by nervously asking, if he wants to ruin his life for hitting someone in high school, as he's already graduated. However, this didn't faze our Chad as he quickly activated his signature skill, making it so the girls are unable to move, yet aware of what is about to happen. He then whipped out his hand without a wand as he wished in his head that someone would say, "You're a wizard, oh Yang." Nevertheless, with just his hands, he whisked away her phone and made it blow up instantaneously. Afterwards, he comboed his magical act by activating one of his new skills, Devil Effect. Thus, a green and purple aura began emitting all around him as he calls upon Trunks, he of empowers. With his aura applied, the girls, currently unable to move but fully aware of their surroundings, begin to ask what on earth is he. Then, within a blink of an eye, Ouyang closed the gap and asked her if she wants to be destroyed, because she had more balls than the guys earlier. However, with a change of heart, she starts apologizing and mumbles the words "Hook, hook." As she continued to cry, Ouyang felt surprised and began feeling sad for her, as she broke down from a single threat. Suddenly, a notification appeared, alerting Ouyang that he has achieved 100 interest from the girl named Kang Jihee, causing him to be a little freaked out. Ouyang then glanced to the left to notice another notification, again alerting him that Yoon Mingyum has also achieved 100 interest in him. Now confused even more as to why the girls are suddenly becoming interested in him, he realizes that they the typical young trait of liking bad boys who can fight or treat them roughly. With such the turntables now, Ouyang nervously questions why the two girls would start falling for him even with the threat of death just around the corner. As such, he facepalms, so he brings the two together, shoulder by shoulder, only to tell them both to come back next year, as they are still currently students, and apparently Ouyang has standards now. Nonetheless, he leaves the girls alone and waves off into the sunset, while he also tells the boy, Gunwon, to follow him home. As the two now walk together speechless, Ouyang starts thinking about how he can't believe he actually turned down two girls. However, upon finishing his thoughts, Ouyang is greeted by a new notification, revealing to him that he has now randomly lost 3 stat points due to actually completing some good deeds. Unfortunately for the Armin look-alike, he taps Ouyang's shoulder for attention at the wrong time, causing the absolutely angry Ouyang to turn around. Even with his demon-like demeanor on display, Mini Armin is able to still bow and thank Ouyang for everything. As such, Ouyang waves him off and says no worries, where he tells him next time to try and not get beat up. However, Gunwon does not easily go away as he attempts to invite Ouyang to his house for some free food as a token of his appreciation for saving his life. But we all know as soon as we hear someone say food, then they already have my full attention. As such, the two head home to his humble abode. Upon arriving, the delightful smell and look of delicious food easily welcomed Ouyang home. Yet in truth, it looks like the soup won't be the only meal he'll be having, as he also gets greeted by his mom. Now looking like he's constipated, we get reminded that this could be a very cultured chapter. Nevertheless, we are met with some foreshadowing as the mom says eat lots. Meanwhile, Ouyang is busy looking at her detailed information, where it's revealed that somehow Restaurant Lady already has 40 interest in Milkman. She then tells Ouyang to enjoy the meal, but we all know what Ouyang is currently thinking. As such, he takes his first bite, but his look says it all as he's totally conflicted. It's at this point we realize it was not MSG that made him drool, rather, his fantasies taking a hold of him. Luckily, Armin speaks up and asks if the food is great, allowing Ouyang to come back to reality. With him snapping back to reality, he starts to really compliment the food, but is still too busy thinking about something else. Meanwhile, Supermom thanks him for liking the food and continues by telling him that if he doesn't like it, then he does not need to be too shy. However, Ouyang pipes up by claiming that he isn't just being polite, as he's adamant that the food is actually good. Then bang, a domination quest subsequently dropped, where Ouyang will receive immense amounts of experience points based on how far he gets. Thus, for the first time, Ouyang is absolutely horrified that he actually gained a domination quest, where he starts feeling downcast as he has to think twice about completing a married woman. Unfortunately for Ouyang, a follow-up notification appeared, revealing to him that if he fails to complete the quest, he will lose 5 levels and his entire dominated list will be erased. Ouyang then abruptly stood up, quite shocked that the penalties for failure are so severe, causing Jungwon to worriedly ask if Ouyang's okay. Not realizing how he just reacted in real time, he acts as if he's perfectly fine, and also perfectly deflects his current uproar by claiming he got a sudden, unexpected text message. However, Armin starts to think he's a little bit off his rocker, as he says he doesn't even have his phone in hand. As such, he leans closer and double-checks if he's actually okay. At this point, Armin starts to piece things together, as he directly asks Ouyang if he's actually a superhuman. Simultaneously, Supermom begins to get confused, so she asks the two what they are exactly talking about. Now stuck in a sticky situation again, Ouyang attempts to play it off, only for Armin to increasingly believe that Ouyang is actually superhuman due to him never telling Ouyang his name, and well, the way he fought everyone off. Luckily for Ouyang, he gets saved by the bell, as Supermom starts to think Mr. Colossal Titan has been playing too much Roblox Fruits again. But Armin fervently attempts to explain that this time it's actually real, claiming that he saw it with his own 2 eyes. Meanwhile, Ouyang is stuck at the corner of the table, nervously watching on as things continue to unfold. Nevertheless, Supermom attempts to make her son not seem crazy, so she ends up calling Armin a big troll. Thus, Armin tries to get Ouyang on his side, but all Ouyang could do is play along. Eventually, Ouyang begins to crack, so he theoretically asks if he's actually superhuman. Why does Armin care so much? So Armin quickly responds by saying that of course, fate has led Ouyang here to teach him superpowers. Now even more frustrated, Ouyang continues to ask what he would do with superpowers, but before he could answer, the two get interrupted by Supermom demanding Armin to stop with nonsense. In the end, Armin finally apologizes for saying something stupid, causing him to head home and totally dejected. But now Supermom is alone with the Demon King, where she reveals to him that she's known that Armin has been bullied for a long time now. She continues on by explaining that Armin is a really good kid, but he's a little bit obsessed with video games and anime. As such, she's tried to make him change, but she has never been successful over the years. Now taking the opportunity, Ouyang promises to her that he'll change him, so she happily thanks him. However, Ouyang asks for a favor in return for helping him, so he straight up asks Supermom if he can fill up her old fridge with his gallons of milk just once. The story continues with Jungwon noticeably angsty from what she just heard. However, she gives Ouyang another chance to redeem himself by shrugging off what he just said. Unfortunately for her, even with a second chance, Ouyang doubles down and begins to insist that he wants to explode her, as he's the protein man. Nonetheless, he continues by begging her to go to a place where the two can quietly talk. As such, the duo end up heading towards another part of the restaurant. At this very moment, I looked at the drink for you sign, where it hit me that we are very much in cultured territory. Meanwhile, Ouyang realizes that with him thinking with his banana has once again led him to another sussy moment. Regardless, Ouyang corners Jungwon, but she begins to stutter in the face of such a young demon king. Now faced with the final confrontation with Armin's mom, he confirms to her that he is indeed a strange person. Regrettably for Ouyang, his delivery came out the wrong way, so he ends up scaring off Jungwon. Now in a pickle, he tries to save himself from his awful delivery, so he begins to attempt to use his brain rather than his pineapple. Thus, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is that he tells Jungwon he's actually superhuman. Unfortunately, Jungwon responds in French for the first time, causing Ouyang to activate his devil effect to try and convince the mother of the Colossal Titan. With the surrounding area fully illuminated in dark power, Jungwon begins to falter. However, Ouyang isn't finished yet, so he also shows off his telekinetic powers in full force. Success, it works, as Jungwon is now on her knees, fully believing that this is not just a prank bro moment. Ouyang then activated his full Riz powers by claiming that he really is a superhuman as he turned off devil effect. As such, Jungwon responds by opening her mouth really wide, realizing that Armin was actually not making it all up earlier. Nevertheless, with his plan actually working, he kneels before her and tells her that he usually hides his powers. But he also claims that today was a different day, as he had to help Armin out. Furthermore, he smoothly explains that if he uses his powers too much, a problem usually arises beneath his clothes. Unfortunately, Jungwon didn't understand what he meant by that. So he makes up the fact that he'll die if he doesn't fill someone else up with milk in time, since he's the protein man. Now, noticing the shock left on her face, Ouyang doubles down again as if he just came from KFC, so he continues on by claiming that he used too much of his powers to save Armin today. So he's in big trouble. But since Jungwon is a nice lady, all she could get from the conversation is that he's apparently in an actual dire situation. Regardless, to sell the act fully, he begs even more than I do, when I want that final kill for that ace or penta. As such, Jungwon begins to seriously think about joining the dark side, as Ouyang actually did in fact save her son. However, she snaps out of her unconventional thoughts, only to begin apologizing to Ouyang without fully explaining why. Eventually, she musters up the courage to explain that she's married and she's just an old lady now, coupled with a large age gap. With what was just said, Ouyang begins to cry as nothing mattered, other than her large twin pyramids that has seemingly perked up. Suddenly, the turntables occur as Jungwon begins to look at Ouyang, like I do when I see chocolate. Jungwon then says that maybe she can help with other ways like using her hands, shape the dough. Too bad, as Ouyang counters like a pro from Roblox Retail Tycoon, demanding that it isn't enough for a superhuman like himself. Instead, he ups the ante by asking her to use her face hole instead, as he claims it's okay enough to actually avoid all danger for today. With such the crazy counter, Jungwon begins to shake at the thought of her actually going through with it. Nevertheless, Oh-young seemingly disappears as he awaited her response, only for Jungwon to realize that he's still here, as she notices his armor on the ground as he was using super speed. She then heard a voice telling her he's ready, so she begins to turn around. It was at this moment our editor had to go to the bathroom, as the scene progresses towards the climax of a cultured anime. Now we're the ones in disbelief as Oh-young saved a boy only to become his milkman stepdad. Fast forward to the evening where Jungwon attempts to sleep soundly only to have a sleepless night as she could only think about what transpired today. However, she tries defending herself by telling herself that at least it was thick and sticky, like my snot when I'm sick. Eventually, she starts dwelling more on the side of what could have happened instead, causing her to fall over in a compromised position, with no one else around her. Nonetheless, the next morning, Oh-young wakes up and the first thing that comes to mind is how close he was to his final goal with the super lady. As such, he facepalms and opens the detailed tab on her, where it's revealed that he barely increased the domination level he had on Jungwon. But just like in any game or anime you don't finish, you end up feeling compelled to finish everything to completion, so Oh-young heads back to school for the first time in a while. At school, we run and meet Ran, who's a bit jealous because Oh-young has not contacted her in a while. She then runs into Naeon, where she begins to interrogate her and asks if the two have been busy without her, only for Naeon to claim that she too has not received a single phone call from Master. Thus, the two quickly came to a conclusion, where the duo end up thinking that he must be busy with Nami instead. Now infused with the thought of her sister solo leveling Oh-young by herself, she begins to harness her own dark energy. However, Oh-young finally shows up with a serious look already equipped. With his mere presence alone, the girls were able to quickly pick up on his scent. Upon trying to greet the loser Oh-young, now turned into a Chad, they are quickly rebuffed as Oh-young claims he's a little busy today. It then turns out that he beelines straight to Jungjin, who actually turned up to school today. Thus, he swiftly made his way in front of him, with Jungjin still fresh with the memory of getting destroyed. Suddenly, without Jungjin even moving an inch, he gives one kicked man once again. Now on the floor from a single kick, Jungjin begins to tremble in fear and quickly apologizes and claims that he won't ever like Ran anymore. Surprisingly, Oh-young decides not to destroy even more, and merely only asks if he's the former leader of the Bukien High School. Jungjin then confirms with a scared nod, so Oh-young threatens him to discipline his juniors unless they want to face the full wrath of the Demon King. And just like that, he walks away happily, reminding Jungjin to make sure no one ever goes near Gunwon again. Meanwhile, as Oh-young attempts to leave the school, he encounters Naeon and Ran eagerly asking why he's leaving so early. So he turns around and tells them that if you eat only pizza and chicken every day, you'll get sick of it, so he's trying to get some rice and soup. Naeon then giggles as both her and Ran clearly did not understand his analogy. Nonetheless, back at the restaurant, it's revealed that Jungwon's mind is muddled by the thoughts of Oh-young. But speak of the devil, the Demon King arrives just in time. However, Jungwon is fully taken by surprise at his arrival, as she asks why exactly he's here on a school day. Oh-young then quickly ignores her and asks if Armin is not home yet, but just like the Flash, the two disappear into a closet. Inside, Oh-young receives a lesson from a very experienced wizard, since she's basically as old as Gandalf. During the entire sussy ordeal, she begins being unable to breathe, just like our editor when he sees these scenes, since they're breathtaking. Long story short, the timeless mom just age-diffed every other girl Oh-young has encountered before. Eventually, he was able to fully rock her boat without having to resort to the use of his own powers. As such, she returned the favor to the milkman, officially helping him get into the line of lineage for the 9 Titans. Suddenly, the two hear a knock on the door as Armin has finally arrived home. He follows up by asking if his mom is inside her room resting, so he actually catches her fully surprised at his arrival. Unfortunately for Jungwon though, our Demon King decides to push the limit even further, as the opportunity has finally come. Oh-young has decided to push her past the limit of no return, trying his best to cosplay an Elden Ring speedrunner, trying to defeat all bosses without getting hit once. As such, her indoor special voice begins to transform into the sound of a beast titan as Oh-young continues to besiege her with battering rams. Meanwhile, Armin begins to knock even harder, where he begins to look like he wants to transform into the colossal titan. Regardless, he proceeds to turn the knob on the door fully while continuing to shout for his mom behind the door. Fortunately for Jungwon, she's able to save the day by claiming that she's just changing right now, causing Armin to stop trying to open the door as he's not sussy like someone else. Thus, the two continue on as Armin heads back down to the main area, where he tells her to not worry about him and to take her sweet time. But since Armin is such a nice and considerate man, he also shouts back that he's going to the restaurant so he can open a shop up for them. Meanwhile, Ouyang continues on seething with a battering ram, even though the walls have already been breached. In the end, he's able to increase his domination level to 40%, but another notification appeared, alerting him that her interest decreased by 10 due to his wicked deeds. The story continues with anime Armin back at work, where he's grateful for how hard Jungwon has been working, still not realizing there's been an intruding evil force that has taken a liking to the mother of our colossal titan. After having fun with the dark force, Jungwon continues to act like nothing ever happened, only to ask if Armin has been doing well at school lately. But, as if destiny decided to say hello, Armin brings up Oh Hyung in their conversation. So her body instantly perks up, almost as afraid as I am, when I realize I'm not drinking lactose-free milk. As such, Jungwon quickly retreats from Armin, creating the common excuse of feeling ill. However, upon arriving in her room and laying down in bed, her mind only wonders about the insane secret she's been hiding from her very own son. But then the Sussy Nation attacked her mind, where she reveals that hearing the Demon King's name has already turned on her light bulb. Meanwhile, Ouyang himself is busy playing mobile games, but he gets frustrated from continually losing. Thus, he tells himself that games are for losers anyways, so he instead directs his attention to his previous endeavor the day before, where he was able to fully conquer a relic. Too bad for him though, as that was a fatal mistake to think of his friend's mom, as now his peaches and bananas started to fully form once again. Somehow he gains some standards once again, not wanting to see her as he thinks it's too late at night. But then it dawned on him as he remembered that he's super overpowered with unfathomable skills. As such, he rushes to get up from his bed and joyfully activates the skill soul connecting, super eager to reconnect with the bombshell that is Jungwon. Suddenly, a pop-up notification occurred, alerting Ouyang that he cannot connect to his target right now. Now fully clapped from the system notification, he begins to be outraged as he searches for a clue to why he cannot activate his skill. Eventually, he discovers that he cannot soul connect to her, due to the specific condition of the target domination having to be over level 70. Now even more frustrated, he begins to blame how bad the skill is, claiming that it's almost as bad as the chamber nerf. So to double check what he needs, he whips out his activation list and realizes Jungwon only has a domination level of 69. It was then, at this moment of sulking, that Ouyang finally realized he has met his first ever defeat. But since he's the stubborn boy, he starts to think of just playing with the other girls instead, as he still needs some relief. But then, as if another god heard his cries, his activation list appears out of nowhere, where it's revealed that Jungwon's domination has increased to 70. Upon closer look, the blue ball beside her name begins to light up, as our brother already has blue balls himself. Nonetheless, Ouyang quickly takes the opportunity upon him and activates his eye, where the magical system wants him to confirm he wants to be teleported to Jungwon. In an instant, he gets teleported straight back to the restaurant. There, he once again finds himself transforming into the invisible man from the Fantastic Four. Regardless, he finds Jungwon beside him, busy thinking about him while doing some very suspect actions. As such, Ouyang is instantly satisfied at the sight of Jungwon being weird. But then, like a ghost, he begins whispering to her, since you know he's invisible. With a voice seemingly coming out of nowhere, Jungwon begins to get scared. So the first thing she mentions out loud is the fact that she does not like student Ouyang. Of course though, Ouyang claps back and begins to threaten her by claiming he'll never stop by to satisfy her true desires. Thus, she begins to plead, asking the so-called ghost what she should do. So Ouyang begins to order her around, doing the exact same things that Rand did in episode 1. Eventually, Ouyang gets too excited watching Jungwon play games by herself, so he starts to transform into Lickitung from Pokemon. Afterwards, he evolves into a full-size jackhammer, coming at her with full power. Thus, Ouyang is able to fully increase her domination level to max, allowing him to also complete his first ever B rank level domination quest. More notifications then popped up due to the quest completion, alerting him that he has now acquired a brand new skill for his first B rank difficulty completion. It's then revealed that the brand new skill is named the Monster King's Knight, stuck at level 1. Regardless, the next day near a coffee shop, Ouyang begins to wonder about his brand new Monster King's Knight skill, so he finally pulls up its detailed information. It's then discovered with the skill description that Monster King's Knight will basically allow someone of his own choosing to have some of his powers and status for a limited time. Upon realizing what the skill actually does, Ouyang gets fully disappointed, totally unaware that he could make one of you guys as powerful as him. So he continues to sigh, thinking to himself why the system could have just not given him more skills or a level up. Suddenly, the door swings open, where it's revealed that Armin with the power of Titans has walked in to meet Ouyang. He then quickly prompts Armin to sit down, to which Armin is swift to agree to. It turns out that Ouyang is planning to use his brand new skill on Armin, so he could fake teach him some superpowers. But since Ouyang is broke from not using his time-stop powers anywhere else, he orders Armin to get them some coffee before they start. Upon receiving his coffee, Ouyang then unravels the plan to teach superpowers to Armin as he pestered him for days. With the words superpowers coming out, Armin is super shocked as he can now live the life of being a true powerful Blox fruit user. Armin then creates a scene, refusing to believe he's about to awaken his dough fruit. However, Ouyang is quick to shut him down, telling him to shut up or else everyone will realize his true identity. After Armin settled down, Ouyang lets him know some very vital details if he wants to gain superpowers, that is. The first is the fact that his goal must align with what Ouyang wants, and the second is that he must actually be talented in the way he uses them. With the two main rules set in stone, Ouyang gets up and asks why Armin really wants superpowers. Armin then reveals that he truly wants powers so he can protect his mom and his sister. Suddenly, Ouyang gets intrigued as Armin made the mistake of mentioning his sister. But then it gets worse as Armin proceeds talking about how hot his sister and mom is, like a true sussy baka. Now realizing how much of a bombshell his mom is, Ouyang begins to ask about his sister. It's then we discover that Armin's sister is actually a K-pop idol trainee from a prestigious company. Upon hearing this, Ouyang quickly asks what's her name, so Armin lets him know that her name is Choi Nana. In an instant, he realizes that he's heard the name before, where it eventually dawned on him that the Choi Nana is actually the part-time worker he's been trying to bag the entire time. Unfortunately for Armin, Ouyang begins to summon and talk to his inner demons after hearing the revelation of the girl he's been looking for can now be found. Nevertheless, Armin continues on with his sob story, where he tells Ouyang that his family constantly gets taken advantage of by other men since he's weak and pathetic. However, Ouyang switches to a state of frenzy upon learning that someone has taken advantage of Jungwon. But instead of getting a name from Armin, Armin just continues on with his story, where it's further revealed that his school bullied him even more for being Nana's brother. They even went as far as photoshopping some disappearing magic on her clothes on pictures, to which he had enough. Unfortunately for Armin, he was too weak to fight back, just like Ouyang back before he became the Demon King. Eventually, Ouyang stopped Armin from telling the rest of his story, as he's heard enough. Now super angry from learning what Armin has had to go through his entire life, his demon force begins to ooze out of him. As such, he tells Armin to forget everything he said, as Ouyang now wants to teach him everything. Ouyang then calls Armin a loser and proceeds to ask what superpower he wants, as the Demon King can give him anything. Thus, Ouyang begins to list out every superpower he has, only to amaze Armin, as he claims that it's super crazy since most main characters in anime only have one or two. Nevertheless, Armin proceeds to ask if Ouyang can stop time as well, only for him to realize seconds later that the world around him stopped moving. Upon looking around, he realized that time really did stop, even people's faces started to disappear. Then like a Chad, he turns to Ouyang, where Ouyang hits him with it. "Does that answer your question?" line? Unfortunately, Ouyang bunks his head after he asked the stupid question, if he's God. Regardless, Ouyang gets impatient, so he tells Ouyang to hurry up or else he won't teach him any of his skills. Eventually, Ouyang decides that he'll just give one that suits him since boring Armin is taking 10 years to pick. Thus, Ouyang activates his eye to take a closer look at Armin's skills, where he discovers that Armin has worse skills than he did back then. Now realizing that he has a tough task ahead of him, he gets slightly nervous, but he activates Monster King's Knight. An immense flash of red power then rushed Armin, fully empowering him with his Knight ability. A pop-up then occurred, congratulating Ouyang of appointing his first ever Knight, while also letting him know that it'll last for an entire week. Lucky for Ouyang, another notification appeared, alerting him that he has gained the special skill named Ravaging Hands at level 1. Ouyang once again took a closer look at Armin, where he discovers that he has gained a few stat points and more importantly, the skill Telekinesis. Ouyang then proceeded to tell Armin that he gave him some of his strength since he was weak, but he'll only feel stronger for about a week. As such, the two began to work on Armin's telekinesis by trying out on a single cup. After stretching his hands and mentally focusing on the cup, Armin was able to successfully use his brain to transport the cup to his hand. However, after a single use of his brand new powers, he quickly collapsed due to him not having enough stamina. Eventually, Armin is able to recover a bit, right before Ouyang was about to leave. As such, he stops Ouyang and asks if he'll get popular with girls now if he gets stronger. With the sudden change in topic, Ouyang brightens up as he begins to think to himself that he might now have a true prodigy in the making. But since he has gained the powers of a demon king, he whips out his phone and calls over Nami. Within seconds, she arrives to meet up with the two at a cafe. Upon arriving, Nami demands to know why Ouyang would ever call over a busy student like her, as she's always studying for her exams. However, Ouyang ignores her question and proceeds to compliment her as she's all dressed up. It's as if she knows she'll be cramming something else, other than cramming study material. Regardless, Ouyang turns to Armin as he grins, explaining to him how girls will come running as soon as he calls them. Unfortunately, Nami is totally shocked by what he just told Armin, but Ouyang turns to her and reminds her to pipe down and lower her voice. In an instant, she obeys, finally remembering that Ouyang is actually a demon king. Too bad though, as his gaze drops down, so he mentions how her peaches look more plump than usual. But before she could reply, he initiates contact as he knows Nami is into public power dynamics. Meanwhile, Armin nervously sips his drink since he's probably never been that close to a girl before. At the same time, Nami whispers to Ouyang, asking him what he's doing in front of Armin. But like always, he ignores her and just commands her to sit down and stop getting angry. Afterwards, we begin to turn into the Protein Man Cultured Street as Milk Boy begins to whisper back, asking her if she didn't forget what she was supposed to do. She then turns to him, absolutely petrified as her words come out of her mouth. Wait, you mean here? But since Ouyang is menace to society, he demands her to spread, like my jelly. Ouyang then cosplays a border patrol guard since he's basically doing a surprise inspection. That's why Nami looks exactly like this. Regardless, Nami begins to quake as Ouyang decides to reward Nami due to her flawless record of obedience. He then grins and stares at her as he continues his inspection in front of Armin without him even stopping time. Eventually, Nami tells him to stop since if he continues, she warns him that she might erupt like a volcano in public. But of course, to be expected with this menace to society, he graces her with even more of his powers. Armin then intervenes, asking if she's alright since he somehow has no clue to what's happening even though they are right in front of him. Nevertheless, Nami is somehow able to gain composure as she replies by claiming that she's perfectly fine. It was at this moment that their faces disappeared, so we all know the author has something up his sleeve. But then, instead of the Sussy Nation attacking, all Ouyang does is introduce the two to each other. He even introduces Nami as his girlfriend to Armin, so Ouyang proceeds to ask him if he thinks Nami is pretty. Armin agrees, but this boy is dumb, as he brings attention to his sister, as he claims Nami is as pretty as his sister. Thus, our Protein King begins to lay his trap cards all around Armin, as he asks if his sister is actually that pretty. He continues on, trying to get more information from Armin, by claiming that maybe she isn't that pretty since he's always surrounded by beautiful women like Nami. He adds that Nami is probably better since she's also studying law in a top university. With Ouyang's demeanor changing as he continues to talk about Nami, Armin begins to notice that something is off. Upon closer look, Armin realizes that Ouyang has started to look at Nami, as if he's a beast hunting down the prey, that is Nami. As such, he excuses himself from the table and tells Ouyang that he's heading towards the bathroom. Ouyang then returns to his normal human-like self as he tells Armin to go to the bathroom. Nami then instantly shouts for him to come back as the brilliant lady knows she's in danger if left alone. Her hunch was terrifyingly accurate as Ouyang explodes with power as he activates Stopwatch. Since he gained new abilities from becoming stronger, he chooses Nami to not get frozen in time. Meanwhile, the entire world, including Armin, has stopped right in her tracks. Ouyang then begins to groan with everyone frozen, telling Nami that he couldn't hold back anymore. A banana then abruptly enters the scene, so Ouyang gets up and tells Nami that he's ordering the usual menu. However, she's totally flustered as she's never done anything in public before, not noticing that time is currently stopped. Thus, Ouyang claps back by asking her why she's faking being flustered, as she knew all along what this would all lead to. Nevertheless, Nami begins to stammer, as she asks if they really have to finish the job in such a public place like the cafe. But then, Ouyang actually raised a good point for the first time as he asks her why she actually came with no undies. This is the one time I will side with Milkman, as he actually checkmated her. He then changes the subject as he tells Nami that she's now being rewarded for being so obedient. In spite of what he just said, Nami looks on and tells him that this doesn't feel like a reward. Upon hearing number 3 talk back, Ouyang flashes a stare exactly the same one that people use on me when I fart beside them. Anyways, Nami then explains that what she really meant is that she feels embarrassed. But, as usual, our Demon King ignores everything she just said and orders clothes to become invisible. However, Nami doesn't move as she's left shocked, so Ouyang reminds her that if they don't turn invisible, instead they'll be ripped like my jeans. As such, she finally looks around and obeys, as she realizes that everyone else is frozen in time. She then continues to obey the Demon King, and upon completion of her task, asks Ouyang if everything looks better now. He agrees, but just like in every sussy anime, he points as he wants Nami to crawl to him. As she completes her second task, Ouyang begins to tease her, as he mentions that he at least waited until fully activated stopwatch. Anyways, ensue your imagination as Nami takes a trip to get a Slurpee so she can slurp it all. Meanwhile, Armin has somehow gained a little bit of consciousness as he asks himself why he cannot move his body a single inch. But Armin is just like me, man, he really needed to go to the toilet, so he begins to curse Ouyang for stopping time. However, he starts hearing what appears to sound like farts, but more wet if you know what I mean. Good thing Armin was looking away when Ouyang stopped time, as Ouyang is always quick to raise the level from 0 to 69. Eventually, our cosplay lover begins to cosplay a jackhammer again as he moves Nami onto the table. Poor Armin, man, first his mom, now he has to stand there, probably thinking someone else is farting an army, while he himself has to go to the bathroom. Nonetheless, the next day arrives without us knowing if Armin made it or if his pants turned brown. Speaking of Armin, we find him still stuck in bed, unable to sleep as he claims that the weird farting noises were too weird since he's never heard them before. But then it dawned on him, was it actually just Ouyang and Nami performing a milk show? Thus, he begins to use his imagination on Nami, but he can't believe it, as she looks so confident and innocent. Anyways, he slaps himself away from his daydreaming, so the young prodigy gets up from bed, still totally frustrated that he's now having distracting thoughts. His monologue then continues as he starts to look sad, claiming that the two lovebirds are adults and has nothing to do with him. Thus, Armin brings his focus towards his brand new powers. It's then revealed that he can now see the same game notifications like Ouyang, where he discovers that he has partial resistance to Ouyang's stopwatch. Now totally focused to get girls, he begins to train his stamina by doing some push-ups. He ends up training the entire time until dawn. Upon stopping, he gets ready for school and waves goodbye to his mom. Now comment below who you guys think is the best girl so far, since even Jungwon looks like she shaves some of her age every episode. Anyways, at Armin's school, he finally begins to walk with confidence as he feels great due to the powers he has gained from Ouyang. But then one of the bullies bump into him, thus Armin is quick to apologize like his old self. This time though, as the bully is about to strike him, he smacks himself in the face instead, letting Armin go as he's scared of what will happen to him if Ouyang finds out. As such, Armin heads to class, while the bully is absolutely frustrated in not being able to beat up Armin. Nonetheless, Armin starts to think about how much his life can get better, all due to the Demon King Ouyang. Ironically, Armin gets distracted by Minyoung, exactly like how Ouyang was distracted by Ran on his first day at school. As Armin stares at Minyoung, he begins to plan his conquest, totally inspired by the Chad that is Ouyang. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Jungwon seems to be in trouble. We then discover that her problem is that she cannot stop thinking about the Monster King that is Ouyang. But speak of the devil, once again he arrives. However, this time, he demands a bowl of soup ASAP. Now I feel bad for Armin, as his mom would do anything for the Demon King, and soon Ouyang will meet his K-pop idol sister. Regardless, Jungwon trembles as she watches Ouyang angrily finish the bowl of soup, since it feels like her gates have been missing a certain Demon King banana plantation. After finishing the bowl of soup, Ouyang smashes the spoon on the table, basically foreshadowing what he's planning to do next. But as if Jungwon is also in sync with Ouyang's desires, she simultaneously starts shaking after feeling Ouyang slam the table. Now imagine a high school boy ordering a grown woman around, as that's exactly what's happening here. As Ouyang beckons Jungwon to get closer, he then asks if it's true, if her customers actually treat her poorly due to her being a woman with no husband around. Initially, she hesitates to spill the beans, as she claims that it's just the customers drinking a little bit more that they can handle. With Jungwon trying to pass it off as a normal occurrence, Ouyang decides to grab the old cake beside him, intently asking Jungwon if customers do the same with her. As she trembles a little bit more, she tries to explain that they don't go as far as that, but she gets interrupted as Ouyang decides to attack closer to her home base. With the Demon King reaching for her defensive fortress, his eyes disappear, yelling at her that she's his, and orders her to make sure no one gets as close as him. Shortly after, the menace gets up from his throne, still frustrated that Jungwon is acting all meek, so he decides it's time for some disciplinary action for letting her customers do what they want. And so Jungwon continues to act aloof, in hopes that her wishes of experiencing the banana tree gets fulfilled, as it's been a long time coming since she's able to climb the mountain to reach the climax. Just as he's about to discipline her, he receives an untimely notification that a new Blox Fruits update just dropped. So he tells Jungwon that he needs to teleport home real quick to call his crew, leaving Supermom disappointed that he would actually waste time just for Roblox. Luckily for Jungwon, Ouyang whispers to her that he wants her to be ready as soon as he's back, expecting clothes to be already missing. He then starts to leave, knowing that Jungwon would comply to his demands without him even needing to stop time or him having to activate his powers. Afterwards, he teleports back home to log in, but he finishes quickly and returns to the restaurant to sit down to wait for Jungwon to realize he's back in action. And just as he thought, he was correct to assume that Jungwon would be ready to tango as she walks up to him with just her socks. Bro actually used his Roblox Rees to make a girl do anything he wants, even though she doesn't even game at all. Anyways, with her ready to escalate the situation further, our boy pulls a Sigma male move as he decides to ignore her, busy grabbing another bowl of soup. Eventually, Oh-young turns to her as she's probably starting to get cold, frustratedly asking Jungwon if she would do the same thing if a customer asked her to do. She then gets flustered, realizing that she's getting lectured by someone at least half her age, since that's the power of a true demon king. Afterwards, she attempts to try to fully justify her actions, unable to really make sense of the current situation, but she fails to do so. Oh-young then screams mega oof, but he eventually changes the conversation as he smirks, asking her to be truthful with him, as he wants to know if she was thinking of him when he stopped dropping by. Now, truth be told, she was doing more than thinking of him, so she tries to play it off, claiming that she wasn't, as she's busy doing other things. However, we all know Oh-young can literally control minds, so she can't really play this game with him, so he starts toying around. In the end, she sighs as she knew it was game over trying to fool the Demon King. As such, Oh-young goes up to her only for him to finally activate his demon eyes as he instantly makes Jungwon feel like she's on cloud 9. And so the rest was history, with Jungwon begging Oh-young to keep attacking through the mid lane, as she wants to experience the dough fruit all to herself. In the end, Oh-young called the old lady a toilet because apparently he straight up upgraded from a bucket, claiming that toilets can be filled way more. Fast forward to the next day, where we find ourselves back at school. Inside YouTube class, the teacher tells you to subscribe to the channel now, just so we can convince the author to release more episodes. Anyways, we discover Ran looking like me in class, busy attempting to not fall asleep. At the same time, Mayeon is busy actually trying to learn in school, which is something totally unheard of. But then, with the corner of her eye, she notices an empty seat where Oh-young usually sits, realizing he's missing again, which is now a couple days straight more than the usual. With him missing, life is like a trash can for the girls, as it's just not the same when they can't experience any fun or relief in life without the Demon King. And so pink-haired Ran ultimately begins to get super irked, probably wondering if the Demon King is too busy playing The Last of Us. Eventually, Ran gets enough, so she starts freaking out in class, slamming her desk in anger, shouting that she can't believe loser Oh-young decided to skip out again. Upon hearing her freak out, Nayoung swiftly turns around to try and calm her down as everyone in the class starts staring at her, as if she's crazy. But she is crazy, so she starts yelling at Nayoung, asking her how could she calm down if Oh-young has not contacted either of them the entire week. Nayeon then nervously accepts the fact that it's true, since it's weird seeing him always missing, as she's worried the demon hasn't been studying, especially with final exams right around the corner. With Nayeon being unmirrored, Ran inches closer to Nayeon, telling her to stop being so stupid, as the exams should be the least of their worries. Instead, Ran cosplays the crazy girlfriend as she explains to Nayeon that she should be more worried that Oh-young has some other girl occupying his time. And so it finally dawned on number 2 that Oh-young might actually replace them, as he might be busy having fun with someone else. As such, Nayeon gets shocked after putting 2 and 2 together to equal 1, causing Ran to start thinking of ways to figure out he is busy trying to get his 4th victim. Meanwhile, Nayeon begins to tear up, unable to believe that the Demon King is not satisfied with a trio of her, Ran and her own sister ready at his disposal. With the advent of the trio, Ran tells her to smarten up, as Oh-young is literally a Demon King with otherworldly powers, so she asks Nayeon, how could an anime menace be satisfied with only 3? Regardless, Ran finally comes up with a plan of her barging into Oh-young's apartment unannounced, proclaiming to Nayeon that it's her turn to discipline him. However, Nayeon thinks it's not a good idea, so she tries to dissuade number 1, explaining that Oh-young told them to wait until he called. Unfortunately, Ran is not currently in a logical and obedient state, so she decides to pat Nayeon on her head, telling her that she could be the nice one, while Ran wants to play the bad cop role. And so Ran gets up and leaves class, telling Nayeon that she needs to go and protect his man at all costs from any evil witches. But as she leaves, Nayeon continues to try and persuade her to not go through with her plan, only for Ran to ignore all her requests. In the end, she actually proceeds with her plan as she Naruto runs to his apartment. Upon finally arriving at her destination, she stares from afar, starting to get nervous, wondering to herself if her plan is actually the correct call. With her losing confidence in her plans, she starts to doubt what she's doing, as she realizes she should have brought along backup. With her brain exploding from all her thoughts flying around, she ends up finding herself sitting on the pavement, unable to decide if she's going to go through with her plan. Meanwhile, inside Ouyang's apartment, the Demon King is busy trying to level up some of his strength, so he starts doing one-thumb push-ups like a Chad. As he works out, a random notification pops up, notifying Ouyang that he has completed his daily quest, giving him the reward of a random bonus stat point. Shortly after, he decides to pull up his status window, where he realized that he's actually losing stats due to him giving some of his powers to Armin from attack on Titan. He then starts thinking about whether or not he should start allocating his remaining stat points, since he's trying to be considerate, thinking that there could be a time where he needs to give more of his power to Armin. As such, he stops hoarding his bonus available stat points and starts allocating them in an attempt to balance all his stats. After confirming his balancing of his stats, light began to flow into him, as if he's witnessing some kind of evolution or level of animation in real life. It's then revealed that due to him reaching over level 20 in agility and stamina, he gained 2 new skills, the passive high speed and another passive called persistent stamina. However, it turns out that both skills are still sealed, as he needs to deactivate his ability lock. Suddenly, another notification appeared, alerting him that all his base stats have now surpassed level 20. Thus, he gains even more rewards, including unlocking a hidden, plus 2 additional activate skills called Milk Bust and Delicate. With 1 billion skills being unlocked, our boy returns to being a sussy baka as he starts salivating at the thought of all his new skills having some very suspect names. Suddenly, he gets interrupted as he tries to learn more about his brand new powers as he starts hearing someone yell from outside his door, calling him a loser out loud. Turns out it's Ran that keeps yelling for her master to come out, so this doesn't seem like it's going to bode well for her. Nevertheless, Ouyang opens the door with his eyebrows sticking out from his hair like a normal person, looking totally annoyed that he just got interrupted in the middle of his sussy business. After seeing the look on Ouyang's face, Ran knows she screwed up since she was told to wait for him, just like when her dad told her he's just going out to grab some milk. So now she starts stumbling upon her words while absolutely regretting showing up to his apartment, but I don't blame her since she looks like she's in heat, probably needing a surprise banana tree plantation attack. Eventually, Ouyang gets tired of waiting for Ran to speak up, so he starts closing the door on her like a true menace, busy wanting to get back to his sussy celebration ritual. However, Ran goes crazy after seeing Ouyang act like he has no care in the world for her, so she finally makes an excuse saying that she wants to learn how to order chicken or pizza. Now, that was the worst excuse I've ever heard, so even Ouyang looks at her like she went loco doco, causing his banana tree plantation to instantly shrink back to 0. With Ouyang's bulge of the Titanic nowhere to be seen anymore, Ran ends up spilling the truth, so she explains that she's only here because she's missed him so much the entire time he was gone. Upon hearing and seeing her get so frustrated that she hasn't seen him in ages, the Demon Lord smirks and mutters the words "oh," causing my sussy senses to quickly tingle off the charts. He then takes this opportunity to remind Ran that she's basically like a dog and he's the owner, so she better behave and follow his instructions or be prepared to get punished. But since Ran is part of the ultimate sussy baka gang, she begins to bark like I show Speed when he first met Kim Kardashian with no care in the world. After cosplaying an anime furry, I did not expect Ran to do a Slav squat, causing a waterfall to come out, making Ouyang's front steps full of anime liquid. And just when she thought the coast was clear, Ouyang berates her for arrogantly keeping some Captain Underpants on, so she quickly removes them to appease the monster. Mere seconds later, the sussy Fire Nation attacks through the use of Ouyang's All Might powers, but he starts teasing her for being boring and becoming easy, unlike the time he first used his powers and abilities on her. Unfortunately, Ran took things too literally while a banana tree was stuck inside her plantation, so she begins defending herself by claiming how popular he is with all the other guys. She then starts getting super emotional during their rice cake smashing, saying that she really likes him, so that's why she threw away all of her pride just to see him. Nonetheless, Ouyang gets overloaded by all the emotional baggage she's putting on him, so his anime snake becomes a baby one while stuck deep inside Ran's treasure, causing her to cry and continue confessing how she feels. Suddenly, a quest notification appears saying that he's received a new quest, and it has to do with Ran's resentment towards him. This catches Ouyang by surprise, since if he fails this quest, not only does he lose Ran as part of his harem, but it'll make all the other girls become suspicious of him, while also lowering all his stats. So now ganked with the biggest quest he's ever had, he must dominate and conquer Ran like never before to take away her resentment, or he faces a demotion from Demon King to Demon Prince. But if he's somehow able to succeed in completing the quest, then he's able to awaken her like in Block's fruits to make their bond unassailable, while he receives a massive boost to his powers. Anyways, Ouyang springs into action, so he quickly tries to make it up to her, but the only thing he could do is wipe away her tears since she won't stop crying. Eventually, she stops being a crybaby when Ouyang tries to apologize profusely without really meaning it, so she ends up asking for him to hug her to help her calm down. And so he hugs her while still scolding her, so his small brain is starting to act up again. But he pulls off a big brain move seconds later. After a quick 2-second hug, his dragon behemoth wakes up from its slumber, so he picks her up with one hand and proceeds to put Ran onto the nearby bed while removing every bit of armor left on his Amazon warrior. So long story short, he uses forbidden abilities to break Ran's back, causing her to say "I love you" after he enters the wrong wormhole for the first time ever. But just when you thought this could not get even more sussy after an entire season, Bro whips out an ability called Milk Burst, and it literally does what you think it does. Regardless, after some intense rice cake smashing that included the wrong wormhole and bursting milk from some twin pyramids of Giza, Ouyang successfully completes the quest. Bro then breathes a sigh of relief right in front of a super defeated Ran after seeing the notification pop up, but the next thing on his mind is if he should go next door to destroy Nami from One Piece next. However, he gets brought back to reality when he hears another notification pop up informing him that Kim Ran has now awakened, but he doesn't know what that means. Seconds later, the turntables turn when Ran gets up looking like a zombie, only for her eyes to lock onto his mountain that's already raging to go, looking like it's time for round 2 of their duel. It's then revealed that since Ran is now awakened, she's gained a couple sussy skills to accompany her level up, so instead of needing more energy like usual, she's stronger than ever, and she's about to use a skill called the Devoted Finish. At the same time, Ouyang is wondering what the heck is going on since he's never seen one of them get utterly destroyed only for them to be ready for round 2 as soon as possible. Nevertheless, Ouyang finds himself on defense now since it's Ran's turn to be offensive, so she wraps his chili hot dog with her own double watermelons, causing him to ascend into another world full of bliss. He's then shocked to find out that his rocket exploded within seconds, so Ran pushes him down like a rag doll and proceeds to activate her next awakened skill called Type Papayas, causing Ouyang's world to collapse around him. So for the first time in a very long time, he's the one that's getting bossed around while he's trying his best to make sure he doesn't pass out from the sheer force of his volcano exploding over and over due to her new skills. But it's all over for Ouyang in a matter of seconds, since he's the first one to tremble so hard from the rice cake experience being so amazing that he actually gets knocked out like Logan Paul versus Mike Tyson. Fast forward to the next day at the great land we call McDonald's, we find someone watching solo leveling on their phone. We discover that the anime weeb happens to actually be Armin. And while he binge watches solo leveling, he's testing out his brand new powers on an extra large Coke, and it looks like he's getting the hang of things. He's now able to actually focus really hard after training a lot, so the girls are happy for him that he's basically able to wield the Force, and it isn't May 4th yet. On the other end of the table is Chad Ouyang, but he doesn't look pleased since he just wanted to eat some salty fries and he didn't show up just to be like a supportive uncle cheering on Armin just so he could win over some girls. So now Bro gets frustrated all over again with a fry stuck in his mouth, blaming Ran for him showing up when he could just be playing Roblox all day. A flashback then occurs back to yesterday once Ouyang woke up right after getting knocked out from the sheer force of his rocket exploding. Turns out, Ran was super worried that her milk machines kept leaking hours later after Bro used his milk burst skill. But Ouyang tells her not to worry as it's totally normal. But she knows that isn't normal since she's not that dumb. Instead, she begins thinking that the Demon King in front of him somehow placed a mini-demon inside of her, causing an endless amount of chocolate milk to be produced, causing her to be preggo like my egos. Upon hearing her crazy accusations about him, he sits her down to explain to her that this is not how any of that works, so he orders her to stop watching so much K-dramas since it makes her sound stupid. He's also able to stop her from continually milk bursting by squeezing the culprits really hard, so Ran finally starts to calm down even though she was screaming at him to marry her to take responsibility. However, things take a turn again when Ouyang learns that since she's in an awakened state now, her ego and wants will be through the roof, so she's no longer the same pushover Ran like before. So she's now back to her old self before Ouyang was able to use his powers on her until she leaves the awakened avatar state, basically allowing her to boss him around until it all subsides. Back to the present, Ouyang facepalms since he's now stuck with Armin after using him as an excuse to make sure Ran doesn't find out he was busy spending so much time with another girl. Nonetheless, after finishing his fries and meal, Ouyang stops being grumpy, so he actually begins to compliment his young prodigy for being able to slowly master his new skills. Bro then spends the time to take a peek into Armin's stats, impressed that almost all his stat points went up except stamina since he's still a virgin, so Ouyang tells him to keep it up. Suddenly, Armin starts to glow purple while feeling like his life force is getting sucked out, causing him and the girls to freak out as they've never seen this before. It's then revealed that it's actually Ouyang's doing, so he tells Armin that he's just taking back the stats he lent him. He then tells him not to worry since the only reason he took back his stats is because he's done a tremendous job growing on his own, so this time he just needs to continue doing his best with just his own strength. Surprisingly, Armin is stoked that he just lost some of his stats since he's now strong enough to do it on his own, causing Nayeon to wonder how the two even met in the first place. The girls then learn from Armin that Ouyang saved him from his bullies and gave him his superpowers to defend himself, making Nayeon fall even more for Ouyang while Ran looks like she isn't slightly impressed. After seeing Ran look like she doesn't even care for him, he goes to scold her, but a notification pops up alerting him that one of his special skills has created a low-level one called Ravaging Eyes. Ouyang also learns that since he let Armin become his knight, every time Armin uses any of his skills, then Ouyang also gets stronger as their experience points are shared. However, as he gets excited upon learning that he's getting stronger day by day without needing to do anything thanks to training Armin, he notices a McDonald's Kiwi walk past him. But she stops in her tracks once she realizes it's Ouyang. So her knees become weak like armed spaghetti, remembering that this dude was the same one that destroyed Nami in their bathroom a few days ago. As such, she starts hitting on him and acts like he's the one that ordered the King Jr., causing Ran to get super riled up as no one can try to steal her man. With Ran now looking like she's about to beat her up into orange pulp, she quickly snaps back to reality and apologizes to everyone at the table. But then, the sussy Fire Nation attacks as her mission to get noticed by Ouyang is surprisingly successful, causing Ouyang to use his powers to check out her detailed information.